The fluorescent lights in Aurelia's private medical center hummed like insects trapped in glass. Imani Cole adjusted her navy scrubs and walked past the night reception desk without making eye contact. The woman there glanced up, took in her appearance, and immediately looked back down at her phone. Imani was used to it. She pushed through the double doors to the 7th-floor intensive care wing and nearly collided with Dr. Pemberton. He stepped back with an expression that suggested she had just walked through an invisible barrier meant for people like her. "You're the new hire," he said. "Not a question. An assessment." "Yes, sir." "Night shift rotation." "Right." He looked past her shoulder as if something more important existed in the empty hallway behind her. "Stay out of room 709. Private patient. We have specialized staff handling that case." Imani nodded and kept her face blank. "Understood." Dr. Pemberton walked away without another word. The moment he disappeared around the corner, Imani exhaled slowly and felt the familiar weight settle across her chest. The weight of being invisible. The weight of being underestimated. It was exactly what she needed. She moved through the corridors with quiet efficiency, checking charts and monitoring equipment with hands that had steadied far worse situations than this pristine hospital could imagine. The other nurses gave her tight smiles that never reached their eyes. One introduced herself as Monica and immediately began explaining procedures that Imani had mastered 5 years ago. "I've got it, thank you," Imani said softly. Monica's smile thinned. "Just trying to help." "I appreciate it." The shift stretched into the early morning hours. Imani worked methodically, her mind half on her tasks and half on the room everyone had told her to avoid. Room 709 sat at the end of the east corridor behind reinforced doors that required security clearance she definitely did not have. Not officially, anyway. At 2:15 in the morning, the emergency alarm screamed through the silence. Room 709. Imani's body moved before her mind caught up. She sprinted down the hallway as doctors stumbled from break rooms and nurses scrambled to understand what was happening. The security guard stationed outside room 709 stood frozen, hands on their weapons, clearly trained for external threats but utterly unprepared for a medical crisis. "Move," Imani said. The guard closest to her frowned. "You're not authorized. He's coding. Move or he dies." Something in her voice made the man step aside. Imani shoved through the door and the scene that greeted her confirmed every instinct screaming in her head. Alexander Vaughn lay in the hospital bed, his vitals plummeting on the monitors, his body seizing as the equipment around him beeped in chaotic symphony. The private physician hired to care for him stood at the bedside with shaking hands, clearly out of his depth. Imani crossed the room in 3 strides. "How long has he been seizing?" The doctor blinked at her. "Who are you?" "Nurse Cole." "How long?" 30 seconds, maybe 40, I don't know, the monitors just started going crazy and I stepped back." She reached for Alexander's wrist, checking his pulse with fingers that knew exactly what they were looking for. His skin burned with fever. His breathing came in shallow gasps. Someone had administered the wrong dosage of sedative. She could see it in the foreline, in the flush creeping up his neck, in the way his muscles locked and released in violent waves. "I need diazepam, 5 milligrams, now," Imani said without looking away from Alexander's face. "I can't authorize that without Dr. Pemberton's approval," the private physician stammered. Imani's gaze snapped to him. "Then he dies, and you explain to the lawyers why you let a billionaire flatline because you needed permission." The man's face went white. He fumbled for the emergency kit and handed her the medication with trembling fingers. Imani administered it with precision, her movements clean and controlled. She adjusted the flow, recalibrated the monitors, and placed her hand against Alexander's chest to feel the rhythm of his heartbeat beneath her palm. "Come on," she whispered. "Not like this." Alexander's body shuddered once, twice, then slowly began to settle. The seizing stopped. His breathing evened out. The monitors gradually returned to stable readings. Imani kept her hand pressed against his chest until she felt his heart settle into a steady rhythm that meant life instead of death. She stepped back and exhaled for the first time since entering the room. The private physician stared at her like she had just performed a miracle. "How did you know what to do?" Imani didn't answer. She was too busy looking at Alexander Vaughn's face. Even unconscious, even pale from blood loss and trauma, he looked exactly like the man she remembered from 3 years ago. The man who had stepped between her and a piece of shrapnel during a disaster relief operation overseas. The man who had taken the hit meant for her and disappeared before she could even thank him. He had saved her life without knowing her name. Now she had returned the favor. "You need to monitor him every 15 minutes, Imani said quietly. "His body is rejecting the sedative. Whoever prescribed this dosage didn't account for his metabolism." The physician nodded rapidly. "Yes. Yes, of course. I'll adjust the protocol immediately." Imani turned to leave, but Alexander's hand shot out and caught her wrist. Her breath hitched. His eyes were still closed, but his grip was ironclad. "Stay." His voice came out rough and barely audible. "You stay." The private physician looked between them with obvious confusion. "Mr. Vaughn, this is just a staff nurse, I'm your primary care. Get out." Alexander's eyes opened and Imani found herself staring into a gaze so intense it felt like being seen for the first time in years. "Everyone out." "She stays." The room emptied in seconds. Security guards, physicians, monitoring staff, all of them vanished like smoke. The door clicked shut and suddenly Imani stood alone beside Alexander Vaughn's bed with his hand still wrapped around her wrist. He studied her face with the focus of a man who had built empires on reading people correctly. "I know you." Imani's pulse jumped but her expression stayed calm. "You're confused. The sedative caused hallucinations." "No." His thumb brushed against the inside of her wrist where her scar sat hidden beneath her sleeve. The scar from the shrapnel that had torn through her arm 3 years ago. Nairobi. The relief camp bombing. "You were there." Her composure cracked just slightly. "You remember." "I remember everything." His voice dropped lower. "You told the medics to help the others first. You bled through your shirt and didn't make a sound." Imani pulled her wrist free gently. "You were shot. You should rest." "Who sent you here?" "No one sent me. I work here." Alexander's laugh was bitter and sharp. "You don't belong in a place like this. You're overqualified and underpaid and every doctor in this building knows it." She should have walked away. Should have maintained professional distance. Instead she met his gaze directly and said, "Maybe I'm here because I wanted to be." His expression shifted into something dangerous and possessive. "Then stay. Mr. Vaughn." "Alexander. You need medical care, not conversation." "I need you." He said it like a fact. Like something already decided. "Tell me your name." "Imani Cole." He repeated it slowly, tasting each syllable. "Imani." The way he said her name made heat crawl up her spine. She stepped back and put professional distance between them even though her body wanted to do the opposite. "I'll check on you in an hour," she said. "You'll check on me in 15 minutes. And you won't leave this wing. I have other patients. Not anymore. Alexander reached for the call button beside his bed. Within seconds, the door opened and a hospital administrator Imani had never seen before stepped inside. Alexander didn't look away from Imani's face when he spoke. Nurse Cole is now assigned exclusively to my care. Clear her schedule. Increase her pay grade. And make sure every person in this hospital understands that she has full authority in this room. The administrator nodded quickly. Of course, Mr. Vaughn. I'll have the paperwork processed immediately. Imani's jaw tightened. You can't just reassign staff without their consent. Alexander's smile was cold and absolute. I just did. The administrator left. Imani stood frozen between anger and something far more complicated. Alexander Vaughn had just rearranged her entire life with a single sentence and he looked completely unbothered by the audacity of it. I could refuse, she said. You could. His gaze traveled over her face like he was memorizing every detail. But you won't. You don't know me well enough to make that assumption. I know you ran into a crisis situation when everyone else hesitated. I know you made a life-or-death decision in under 10 seconds. I know you're the reason I'm still breathing. He paused. And I know you came to this hospital specifically because I was here. Imani's heart slammed against her ribs. That's not true. Prove it. Walk out that door. She should have. Every logical part of her brain screamed that staying near Alexander Vaughn was dangerous. He was powerful and possessive and clearly used to bending the world to his will. He would consume her if she let him. But her feet didn't move. Alexander saw her hesitation and his expression shifted into something almost gentle. 15 minutes, Imani. That's all I'm asking. It wasn't all he was asking. They both knew it. Imani took a slow breath and nodded once. 15 minutes. She left the room before he could say anything else. Her hands were shaking. Her mind raced through 1,000 implications of what had just happened. She had come to Aurelius to repay a debt. To make sure Alexander Vaughn survived the assassination attempt that had nearly killed him. She had not come here to be claimed by him. The night stretched on. Imani returned to room 709 every 15 minutes like clockwork. Each time, Alexander was awake and waiting. Each time, his gaze tracked her movements with an intensity that made her skin prickle with awareness. Tell me about Nairobi, he said during her third check. There's nothing to tell. You were working with Doctors Without Borders. Imani paused while adjusting his foreline. How do you know that? I know everything about the people who saved my life. His voice was matter of fact. You left the program 6 months after the bombing. Why? She didn't answer. Couldn't answer. The reasons she had left were buried under layers of trauma she refused to excavate. Alexander's hand caught hers before she could pull away. His touch was warm and careful despite the strength she could feel coiled beneath his skin. Someone hurt you, he said quietly. Imani's breath caught. We're not doing this. Doing what? Sharing trauma like it creates intimacy. His thumb traced slow circles against her knuckles. Doesn't it? No. It creates obligation. She pulled her hand free. I don't need you to save me, Alexander. Good. His smile was sharp. Because I need you to save me instead. The honesty in his voice cracked something open inside her chest. Imani stepped back and forced herself to breathe normally. Your vitals are stable, she said. You should sleep. Will you be here when I wake up? I'll be here in 15 minutes. That's not what I asked. Imani met his gaze and felt the full weight of what he was really asking. Stay. Belong to this moment. Let me keep you. Yes, she heard herself say. I'll be here. Alexander's expression softened into something that looked almost like relief. Good. Imani left the room and leaned against the corridor wall with her eyes closed. Her heart hammered. Her hand still tingled from where he had touched her. This was dangerous. This was exactly what she had been trying to avoid. But when she returned 15 minutes later and found Alexander watching the door like he had been counting the seconds until she appeared, Imani knew with absolute certainty that walking away was no longer an option. She was already in too deep. And Alexander Vaughn had no intention of letting her go. What happens when a man who trusts no one finally meets someone worth breaking his rules for? Keep watching to find out. The hospital settled into an uneasy rhythm over the next 48 hours. Imani moved through her shifts like a ghost, present but unacknowledged by the staff who had already decided she didn't matter. They whispered when she passed. Speculated about what Alexander Vaughn saw in the quiet new nurse who barely spoke. Imani ignored them all. She had more important things to focus on. Like the way Alexander's wound wasn't healing as quickly as it should. Like the tension that never left his body even when he slept. Like the fact that someone inside this hospital had tried to kill him and nobody seemed interested in finding out who. On her fifth shift, Imani arrived at room 709 to find Alexander sitting up in bed with his laptop open and his phone pressed to his ear. He was barking orders in a voice that could cut steel. I don't care what the board thinks. Redirect the funds through the Singapore account and have Marcus handle the London transfer before markets open. He paused, listening. No. Tell them if they have concerns they can schedule a meeting after I'm done bleeding. He ended the call and looked up at Imani. The hard edges in his expression softened just slightly. You're late, he said. I'm 2 minutes early. You're usually 5 minutes early. Imani set down her supply kit and felt something warm unfurl in her chest at the realization that he had been tracking her patterns. You're supposed to be resting, not running your empire from a hospital bed. Resting is how people lose everything they've built. Alexander closed the laptop and gave her his full attention. Besides, I rest better when you're here. She tried to ignore the way those words settled under her skin. That's the pain medication talking. I haven't taken pain medication in 36 hours. Imani's hand stilled on the blood pressure cuff. Alexander. It makes me foggy. I need to stay sharp. You need to heal. I'll heal faster if I'm not drugged into compliance. His gaze locked onto hers. Unless you're going to physically force me to take it. The challenge in his voice made her pulse spike. Imani wrapped the cuff around his arm with more force than necessary. Don't tempt me. Alexander's smile was slow and dangerous. Is that what I'm doing? Tempting you? You're being a difficult patient. And you like that I don't make this easy for you. He was right. She did. Imani had spent years caring for people who saw her as interchangeable with any other nurse. Alexander saw her as essential. It was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. She checked his vitals in silence, hyper-aware of every place her fingers touched his skin. His pulse jumped under her fingertips. His breathing changed when she leaned closer to examine the surgical wound across his ribs. You're staring, she said without looking up. You're worth staring at. That's inappropriate. So is the way you blush every time I say your name. Imani's cheeks heated instantly and Alexander's laugh was low and satisfied. She stepped back and stripped off her gloves with sharp movements. Your wound is showing early signs of infection. I'm recommending a change in antibiotics. Alexander's amusement vanished. Who prescribed the current antibiotics? Dr. Pemberton. Fire him. Imani blinked. I can't fire a doctor. I'm a nurse. You can and you will. Alexander reached for his phone. I'll have hospital administration send the paperwork to your staff account within the hour. You now have full authority to approve or dismiss any medical personnel involved in my care. Alexander, that's insane. That's survival. His voice went cold. Someone in this hospital has been trying to kill me since I arrived. The sedative overdose wasn't an accident. The infection in my wound isn't random. And I trust exactly one person in this entire building. His gaze burned into hers. You. The weight of that trust crashed over her like a wave. Imani sank into the chair beside his bed because her legs suddenly couldn't hold her. You barely know me, she whispered. I know enough. Alexander set his phone aside and leaned forward despite the pain it clearly caused. I know you could have let me die and walked away clean. I know you took command of a crisis when trained physicians froze. I know you came back every 15 minutes for 2 days straight even though you think getting close to me is dangerous. He paused. Am I wrong? No. Then stop fighting this. This isn't something to fight or accept. You're my patient. I'm a man who wants you in ways that have nothing to do with medical care. The honesty in his voice stole her breath. And you feel it too. Don't lie to me, Imani. She couldn't lie. Not when her hands shook every time he touched her. Not when she found excuses to stay in his room longer than necessary. Not when she lay awake between shifts thinking about the way he said her name. What you're feeling is gratitude, Imani said carefully. I saved your life. Your brain is confusing that with attraction. Alexander's laugh was sharp. My brain isn't confused about anything. I wanted you the second you walked through that door. The fact that you saved my life just proved I was right to want you. You can't just decide you want someone and expect them to fall in line. I don't expect anything. I'm asking. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his fingers curved around her jaw with devastating gentleness. Stay close to me. Let me keep you safe. Let me figure out who's trying to kill me before they realize you're the reason I'm still alive. Imani's heart hammered against her ribs. I can take care of myself. I know you can. But you shouldn't have to. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. Not anymore. The tenderness in that touch unraveled something inside her. Imani closed her eyes and let herself feel the warmth of his hand against her skin for just a moment before pulling back. I need to update your chart, she said, her voice unsteady. Alexander let her go but his gaze followed her across the room. You'll be back in 15 minutes. It wasn't a question. Yes. Good. Imani left before she could do something stupid like kiss him. The hallway felt too bright after the dim intimacy of room 709. She pressed her back against the wall and tried to steady her breathing. Monica appeared around the corner with a medication cart and stopped short when she saw Imani. You look flustered, Monica said with a smirk. What does he have you doing in there? My job. Right. Your job. Monica's smile sharpened. Must be nice having a billionaire decide you're special. Some of us actually had to earn our positions. Imani straightened. Is there something you need, Monica? Just wondering how long you think this is going to last. Men like Alexander Vaughn don't actually care about women like us. We're just convenient until we're not. The words hit harder than they should have. Imani kept her face neutral. I'm not interested in your opinion about my patient. He's not going to save you, Monica said. Whatever you think is happening in that room, it ends the second he walks out of this hospital. Imani didn't respond. She walked past Monica without another word and felt the weight of those words settle like stones in her chest. Because Monica was right. Men like Alexander Vaughn didn't build forever with women like her. They built empires. They controlled markets. They survived assassination attempts and moved on to the next crisis without looking back. Whatever this was between them, it had an expiration date. Imani needed to remember that. She returned to room 709 exactly 15 minutes later and found Alexander on a video call with someone who looked like a lawyer. He ended the conversation the moment she walked in. "Tell me what's wrong," he said immediately. Imani paused while setting up his evening medications. "Nothing's wrong. You're lying. I'm fine." Alexander caught her wrist and pulled her closer with gentle insistence. "Imani. What happened?" She shouldn't tell him. It would only create drama she didn't need. But the concern in his eyes broke through her defenses. "One of the other nurses made a comment about us. About how this isn't real." Alexander's expression went dangerously cold. "What nurse?" "It doesn't matter. Her name, Imani. I'm not getting someone fired because they stated an obvious truth." "What truth?" His grip tightened just slightly. "That I'm using you? That this is temporary?" "Yes." Alexander was silent for a long moment. Then he released her wrist and reached for his phone. Before Imani could stop him, he made a call that connected instantly. "Marcus. I need you to prepare transfer papers for full ownership of the penthouse suite in Manhattan." "Yes, the one overlooking Central Park. Put it in Imani Cole's name. I want the deed processed by tomorrow morning." Imani's stomach dropped. "Alexander, what are you doing?" He ignored her. "Also set up a trust fund. 50 million to start. Full access, no restrictions." He paused. "Because I want to. That's why." "Stop," Imani said, her voice sharp. "Hang up the phone." Alexander ended the call and looked at her with calm certainty. "Done. You can't just give me a penthouse and $50 million. I can and I did. I don't want your money. This isn't about money. It's about making sure every person in this hospital understands that you're not temporary. You're not convenient. You're mine." His voice dropped lower. "And I take care of what's mine." Imani's hands trembled with anger and something far more complicated. "I'm not a possession you can claim. No. You're a woman I'm choosing." Alexander stood slowly despite his injuries and closed the distance between them. "Every day. Every minute. For as long as you'll let me. You don't choose people like me. You choose women who belong in your world. My world is full of people who would sell me out for the right price." He cupped her face with both hands. "You're the first person in years who doesn't want anything from me except for me to survive. Do you have any idea how rare that is?" Imani's eyes burned. "This is too much. Too fast. I've spent my entire life moving slowly and carefully and trusting no one. It nearly got me killed." His forehead touched hers. "I'm done being careful. Especially with you. Alexander. Tell me you don't feel this." She couldn't. Because she did feel it. The pull between them was magnetic and inevitable and completely terrifying. What I feel doesn't change reality, Imani whispered. You're going to heal and leave this hospital and go back to your life. And I'm going to be exactly who I was before you decided I mattered. No. His voice was absolute. You're going to come with me. Her breath caught. What? When I leave here, you leave with me. As my personal nurse. As my protection. As whatever the hell you want to be, as long as you're close enough for me to keep you safe. I have a life, Alexander. A job. Responsibilities. Bring them. I'll relocate everything you need. His thumbs brushed away tears she didn't realize had fallen. I'm not asking you to give up who you are. I'm asking you to let me be part of it. Imani wanted to say yes so badly it physically hurt. But fear held her tongue. I need time to think, she said. Take all the time you need. Alexander pressed a kiss to her forehead that felt like a promise. But know that I'm not changing my mind about you. Not today. Not ever. He released her and stepped back, giving her space even though she could see how much it cost him. Imani fled the room with her heart in her throat and her mind spinning. She made it to the staff bathroom before the tears came for real. Sometimes the most dangerous thing isn't falling for the wrong person. It's refusing to fall for the right one. Stay with us to see what Imani decides. 3 days passed in a blur of 12-hour shifts and stolen moments in room 709. Alexander healed faster than expected, his body responding to treatments now that Imani had taken full control of his medical care. Dr. Pemberton had been quietly reassigned. The private physician had been replaced. Security protocols had been upgraded. But the tension between her and Alexander only grew stronger. They didn't talk about the penthouse or the money or his offer to take her with him when he left. Instead they fell into a rhythm that felt dangerously close to intimacy. He worked from his hospital bed while she monitored his vitals. She brought him coffee the way he liked it without asking. He learned to read her silences and know when she needed space versus when she needed him to push. It was the small things that undid her. The way he waited until she arrived before eating breakfast. The way his entire body relaxed when she walked into the room. The way he defended her to hospital administrators who questioned her authority. On the 8th night, everything changed. Imani was doing her rounds on the general ward when the code alarm screamed through the building. Not from room 709 this time. From the emergency department 3 floors down. She hesitated for only a second before sprinting toward the stairs. The emergency room was chaos. A multi-vehicle accident had flooded the department with critical patients. Doctors shouted orders. Nurses ran between beds. Blood covered the floors. Imani assessed the situation in seconds and moved toward the patient who looked closest to death. A young woman, maybe 20, with crush injuries to her chest and blood pouring from a head wound. I need suction and a chest tube kit now, Imani called out. A resident looked up from another patient. We don't have the staff for that bed yet. Then I'm your staff. Imani didn't wait for permission. She grabbed supplies and got to work stabilizing the woman with hands that had saved lives in war zones and disaster areas. The familiar calm settled over her. This she knew. This she could control. 20 minutes later, the woman's vitals stabilized. Imani stepped back and found half the emergency department staring at her. Dr. Pemberton stood near the nurse's station with an expression caught between shock and resentment. That was impressive, Nurse Cole. I didn't realize you had advanced trauma training. There's a lot you don't know about me. Imani stripped off her gloves and turned to check on the next critical patient. She worked through the crisis for the next 2 hours, moving between beds with quiet efficiency. Other nurses started following her lead. Residents asked for her input. By the time the last patient was stabilized, Imani had inadvertently taken command of the entire emergency response. She was washing blood off her hands when Monica appeared beside her. "Where did you learn to do that?" Monica asked, her earlier hostility replaced with genuine curiosity. Doctors Without Borders. Emergency relief in conflict zones. Monica's eyes widened. "You worked in war zones and you're here working nights at a private hospital?" Imani dried her hands carefully. "Everyone has their reasons. And yours is Alexander Vaughn." It wasn't a question. Imani didn't confirm or deny it. She just headed for the stairs, exhaustion pulling at her bones. She found Alexander standing in the hallway outside his room despite strict orders to stay in bed. His face was pale but his eyes blazed with something fierce and possessive. "You left," he said. "There was an emergency. You could have been hurt." Imani stopped in front of him and felt anger flare hot in her chest. "I'm a trauma nurse, Alexander. Emergencies are literally my job. Your job is keeping me alive. My job is keeping everyone alive." She pushed past him into his room. "You need to get back in bed before you tear your stitches." Alexander followed her and closed the door with a controlled slam. "Don't do that again." "Do what?" "Save lives. Leave without telling me where you're going." Imani spun to face him. "You don't own me. I know that." His voice cracked with frustration. "But I need to know you're safe. Do you have any idea what went through my head when I heard that alarm and realized you weren't here? I can take care of myself." "I know you can." He crossed the room in 3 strides and gripped her shoulders. "But you shouldn't have to. Not alone. Not anymore. You can't protect me from everything. Watch me." The intensity in his gaze stole her breath. Imani tried to step back but Alexander's hand slid down her arms and caught her wrists, holding her in place with gentle insistence. "I watched you save my life," he said quietly. "Now let me return the favor. By keeping me locked away where nothing can touch me." "That's not protection, Alexander. That's possession." "Then let me possess you." His forehead touched hers. "Let me be selfish and territorial and completely unreasonable about your safety. Because the alternative is watching you walk into danger and doing nothing, and I can't live with that." Imani's defenses crumbled. "This is too much. I know. I don't know how to be what you need. You already are." His hands framed her face. "You're everything I didn't know I was missing." The kiss happened before either of them decided to make it happen. One moment they were breathing the same air, and the next his mouth was on hers with a hunger that made her knees buckle. Imani gasped and Alexander took advantage, deepening the kiss until she forgot every reason this was a bad idea. His hands tangled in her hair. Her fingers gripped his shoulders. The kiss turned desperate and consuming and absolutely perfect. Then Alexander pulled back with a curse. "Your stitches," Imani said breathlessly. "I don't care about my stitches." But he was breathing hard and his face had gone pale. Imani pushed him toward the bed with shaking hands. "Sit down before you pass out. Only if you sit with me. Alexander. Please." The vulnerability in that single word destroyed her. Imani helped him onto the bed and sat beside him, close enough that their thighs touched. Alexander laced his fingers through hers and brought her hand to his lips. "I shouldn't have kissed you," he said against her knuckles. "No. You shouldn't have. Are you going to run?" Imani looked at their joined hands and felt the truth settle in her bones. No. Alexander's exhale was pure relief. Why not? Because I'm tired of pretending I don't want this. She met his gaze. But I'm terrified of what happens when you realize I'm not worth all the risk you're taking. That's never going to happen. You don't know that. Yes, I do. He pulled her closer until she was tucked against his side, careful of his injuries. I've spent my entire life calculating risk versus reward. You're the first person who's worth every risk and more. Imani closed her eyes and let herself believe him for just a moment. Let herself imagine a world where this could work. Where she could be the woman Alexander Vaughn chose and kept and protected. They sat in silence for a long time, wrapped around each other in the dim hospital room. Imani listened to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat and felt something inside her chest crack open. She was falling for him. Had been falling since the moment he looked at her like she mattered. And the terrifying part was knowing he was falling just as hard. "Stay with me tonight," Alexander said quietly. "Not as my nurse. As yourself. I have a shift. I'll have it covered. You can't just rearrange my entire schedule every time you want me close. Watch me." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Please, Imani. I need you here." She should have said no. Should have maintained boundaries. Instead she found herself nodding against his shoulder. "Okay." Alexander's arms tightened around her. "Thank you." They stayed like that until exhaustion pulled them both under. Imani woke hours later to find herself curled against Alexander's chest with his hand buried in her hair. The monitors beeped softly in the darkness. His breathing was deep and even. For the first time in years, Imani felt safe. She was drifting back to sleep when Alexander's phone buzzed on the nightstand. He woke instantly, all traces of softness vanishing as he checked the screen. "What is it?" Imani asked. Alexander's expression went cold and deadly. "They found who's been trying to kill me." Imani sat up. "Who?" "One of the board members. He's been shorting my company stock and needed me dead before the next quarterly report." Alexander's jaw clenched. "He bribed a hospital orderly to tamper with my medications." "When did you find this out?" "My security team has been investigating since the overdose." He looked at her. "I didn't tell you because I didn't want you involved. I'm already involved. Not like this." Alexander stood and immediately regretted it based on the way he gripped the bed rail. They arrested him an hour ago. But his partners are still out there. And now that they know I'm onto them, they're going to get desperate. Imani's blood ran cold. "What does that mean?" "It means I'm leaving this hospital tonight. And you're coming with me whether you're ready or not." "Alexander, you can't just leave. You're not fully healed." "I'll heal somewhere secure." He was already pulling on clothes with sharp movements. "I have a safe house outside the city. Full medical equipment. Private security. Everything you need to continue my care. This is insane. This is survival." He turned to face her. "I told you I take care of what's mine. That includes making sure you're nowhere near here when my enemies realize you're the reason I'm still breathing." Imani's heart hammered. "You think they'll come after me?" "I know they will." Alexander crossed the room and gripped her shoulders. "So you have two choices. Come with me now and let me protect you. Or stay here and hope they don't decide you're a loose end worth eliminating." It wasn't really a choice. They both knew it. "How long do I have to pack?" Imani asked. Relief flooded Alexander's expression. 20 minutes. My team is already en route. Imani moved on autopilot, gathering her things from the staff locker room while her mind raced. This was happening. She was leaving with Alexander Vaughn to hide in a safe house while he hunted the people trying to kill him. 3 weeks ago she had been invisible. Now she was at the center of a billionaire's war. She met Alexander at the private exit where 3 black SUVs waited with engines running. Men in suits surrounded them, scanning the area with professional intensity. Alexander took her hand and pulled her into the middle vehicle. The door closed and suddenly they were moving through the city at high speed with a security convoy that looked like something out of an action movie. "Are you okay?" Alexander asked. Imani laughed, the sound bordering on hysterical. "No. None of this is okay. I know." He pulled her against his side. "But you're safe. That's all that matters." She wanted to argue. Wanted to point out that safe was relative when armed men were actively hunting them. But Alexander's arms around her felt solid and real, so she let herself lean into his strength. They drove for 90 minutes before pulling up to a compound hidden in the mountains. Tall fences. Guard posts. Security cameras everywhere. The house itself was modern and sprawling, all glass and steel and defensive architecture. Alexander led her inside to a bedroom that looked like it belonged in a luxury hotel. Medical equipment lined one wall. A king-sized bed dominated the space. "This is where you'll stay," he said. "My room is next door. Security stays on the first floor. If anything happens, you lock this door and wait for me." Imani turned to face him. "And what happens now?" "Now I figure out who else wants me dead and make sure they regret it." His expression was carved from stone. "This ends soon, Imani. I promise." She believed him. Alexander Vaughn didn't make promises he couldn't keep. He started to leave but Imani caught his hand. "Don't do anything stupid." His smile was sharp and deadly. "Too late for that. I already fell for my nurse." Then he was gone, leaving Imani alone in the safe house with armed guards and uncertainty pressing down on her chest. She had saved Alexander's life. Now she just had to trust him to save hers. When the hunter becomes the hunted, will their connection be strong enough to survive? Keep watching to find out how this ends. The safe house became Imani's entire world. Days blurred into each other, marked only by Alexander's medical checkups and the increasingly rare moments when he wasn't locked in his office making calls or coordinating with his security team. His wound healed quickly now that he was eating properly and resting between his vengeful planning sessions. Imani monitored his progress with professional detachment that barely concealed the fear gnawing at her insides. Because Alexander wasn't just recovering. He was preparing for war. On the 5th night at the safe house, Imani found him standing on the balcony overlooking the mountains. His shoulder was still bandaged but his posture radiated controlled violence. "You should be resting," she said. Alexander didn't turn around. "Can't sleep. Because of pain or because you're planning something dangerous?" "Both." He finally looked at her and the exhaustion in his eyes hit her like a punch. "They made their move today. Tried to discredit me publicly. Spread rumors about my mental state. Called my competency into question." Imani moved to stand beside him. "What did you do?" "Released evidence of their embezzlement. All of it. Every illegal transaction. Every bribe. Every lie." His smile was cold. "By tomorrow morning, they'll be in federal custody." "And what about you?" "I'll be exactly where I want to be." He turned to face her fully. "With you." Imani's breath caught at the intensity in his gaze. Alexander, once this is over, you'll go back to your real life. Board meetings. Business deals. Your actual world. My actual world almost got me killed. He stepped closer, crowding her against the balcony railing with careful intent. You want to know what I learned bleeding out in that hospital room? What? That none of it matters. The money. The power. The empire I built. His hands settled on either side of her, caging her in. The only thing that mattered was whether I'd survive long enough to figure out what this feeling was every time you walked through my door. Imani's heart hammered. And did you? Figure it out? Yes. Alexander's forehead touched hers. It's called falling in love. The words hung between them like something sacred and terrifying. Imani closed her eyes because looking at him made it impossible to think clearly. You don't love me, she whispered. You love the idea of me. The woman who saved you. The fantasy. No. His voice was absolute. I love the woman who told me to stop being a difficult patient. I love the woman who ran into an emergency without hesitation. I love the woman who's terrified of trusting me but does it anyway. He pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. I love you, Imani Cole. Not the fantasy. You. Tears burned hot behind her eyes. This is too fast. I don't care. We barely know each other. I know everything that matters. His thumb brushed away a tear that escaped down her cheek. I know you're brave and brilliant and so damn scared of being hurt that you'd rather push me away than risk believing this is real. Because it's not real, Imani said desperately. Real relationships don't happen like this. They don't start with assassination attempts in hospital rooms and running away to secret compounds. Maybe not for other people. Alexander's smile was soft and devastating. But we were never going to be like other people. He was right. Imani had known it from the moment their eyes met across that hospital room. They were inevitable and impossible in equal measure. I'm scared, she admitted. So am I. You're not scared of anything. I'm scared of losing you. His voice cracked just slightly. I'm scared you'll wake up one day and realize you deserve someone easier. Someone who doesn't come with enemies and bodyguards and a target on his back. Imani reached up and cupped his face with both hands. You're an idiot. Alexander blinked. What? If I wanted easy, I would have walked away the first night. If I wanted safe, would have ignored that alarm and let someone else save you. She pulled him down until their mouths were a breath apart. I stayed because I wanted you. Not your money. Not your protection. You. The kiss was different this time. Slower. Deeper. Less about desperation and more about promise. Alexander's hands slid into her hair and Imani let herself drown in the taste of him. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Alexander pressed his forehead to hers. Stay with me, he said. Not as my nurse. Not until this crisis is over. Stay with me because you want to build something real. Imani's answer caught in her throat because saying yes meant stepping off a cliff with no guarantee of landing safely. But looking into Alexander's eyes, seeing the vulnerability he only showed her, she realized she had already jumped. Okay, she whispered. Alexander's smile was pure relief and triumph. He kissed her again, softer this time, like sealing a vow. They stood on that balcony until the mountain air grew too cold to ignore. Then Alexander led her back inside with their fingers laced together and something fragile and new blooming between them. Over the next week, the outside world exploded with scandal. Alexander's evidence triggered federal investigations. Board members resigned. Stock prices fluctuated wildly. News outlets scrambled to piece together what happened. But inside the safe house, Imani and Alexander existed in their own universe. He taught her about his business empire during lazy mornings over coffee. She showed him photos from her relief work and told him stories she had never shared with anyone. They argued about his refusal to follow medical advice. They laughed at terrible movies. They fell asleep tangled together on the couch. It felt ordinary and extraordinary all at once. On the 10th night, Alexander's head of security requested a meeting. Imani sat beside Alexander in his office while Marcus detailed the final arrests. "Everyone involved in the assassination attempt is in custody," Marcus said. "The threat has been neutralized. You're clear to return to the city whenever you're ready." Alexander nodded slowly. "Thank you, Marcus. That will be all." Marcus left and suddenly the room felt too quiet. Imani stared at her hands and felt reality crash back in. "So it's over," she said. "The immediate threat is over. But the work isn't." Alexander turned his chair to face her. "I need to rebuild the board. Restore investor confidence. Clean up the damage. I know. Which means returning to Manhattan. To meetings and public appearances and all the things I've been avoiding." He paused. "Come with me." Imani looked up. "Alexander. I mean it. Move into the penthouse. Let me set you up with whatever you need. Work. Purpose. Freedom." His gaze burned into hers. "Just be close enough that I can see you every day. I can't just abandon my life." "You're not abandoning anything. You're choosing something new." He reached for her hands. "I'm not asking you to give up who you are. I'm asking you to be who you are in my world instead of hiding in the shadows. Your world will eat me alive. Not if I'm standing beside you." Alexander pulled her closer. "I told you I take care of what's mine. That hasn't changed. You want to keep working as a nurse? I'll fund a clinic in your name. You want to go back to relief work? I'll bankroll the entire operation. You want to tell me to go to hell and build something completely separate? I'll support that too." His voice dropped. "As long as you come home to me." Imani's chest ached with wanting to believe him. What if this doesn't work? What if we're too different? Then we figure it out together. His thumbs traced circles on her wrists. "I'm not promising perfect, Imani. I'm promising real. Messy and complicated and worth fighting for." She studied his face and saw nothing but absolute certainty. Alexander Vaughn had decided she was worth keeping and he would move heaven and earth to make it happen. The terrifying part was knowing she wanted exactly the same thing. "Okay," Imani said. "I'll come with you." Alexander's relief was palpable. He pulled her into his lap and buried his face against her neck. "Thank you. Don't make me regret this." "Never." He pressed a kiss just below her ear. "I love you too much to screw this up." Imani's heart stuttered. "I didn't say it back yet." "I know." Alexander pulled back to look at her. "You will when you're ready." "I can wait." But Imani realized she didn't want to wait. Didn't want to hold back the truth just because it was terrifying. "I love you," she said, the words tumbling out rough and honest. "I think I loved you from the moment you looked at me like I was someone worth seeing." Alexander's kiss stole whatever else she might have said. It was claiming and tender and full of promises neither of them could fully articulate yet. When they finally broke apart, Alexander rested his forehead against hers. "We leave tomorrow," he said. Back to reality. Back to the world that's going to have a lot of opinions about us. Let them talk. His smile was fierce and proud. That's my girl. They spent their last night at the safe house wrapped around each other, talking until dawn about the future they were going to build. It wouldn't be easy. Alexander's world came with scrutiny and pressure and expectations Imani had never faced. But she had survived war zones and disaster areas and the loneliness of being invisible. She could survive loving Alexander Vaughn. The next morning, they returned to Manhattan in a convoy that looked less like fleeing and more like a victory parade. Photographers waited outside Alexander's building. News vans lined the street. The story had already broken about the nurse who saved the billionaire's life. Imani's stomach churned with anxiety, but Alexander's hand in hers kept her grounded. "Ignore them," he murmured as they walked through the lobby. "They don't matter. They're going to pick apart everything about me. Let them try." Alexander pulled her into the private elevator. "You're the woman who kept me alive when trained physicians failed. You're the woman I trust with my life. Anyone who has a problem with that can answer to me." The elevator rose toward the penthouse and Imani felt the weight of her old life falling away. She was stepping into something unknown and potentially dangerous. But she wasn't doing it alone. The penthouse was exactly as promised. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. Modern furniture. Space that felt both luxurious and somehow empty. "It needs you," Alexander said, reading her expression perfectly. "Nothing about this place feels like home yet. But it will. With you here." Imani walked to the windows and looked out at the city spreading below her. Somewhere down there was the hospital where this all started. The staff who had underestimated her. The life she had been living in the shadows. She didn't miss it. "What happens now?" she asked. Alexander came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. "Now we build something neither of us expected. We deal with the chaos together. We figure out how to make this work even when it's hard." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "And I spend every day proving you made the right choice." Imani leaned back against his chest and felt something settle deep in her bones. This was home. Not the penthouse or the city or the wealth. Him. "I'm going to hold you to that," she said. "Good." Alexander turned her to face him. "Because I have no intention of letting you down." Their kiss was interrupted by Alexander's phone buzzing insistently. He ignored it twice before finally checking the screen with a curse. "The board wants an emergency meeting. Press conference. Damage control." He looked at Imani with apology written across his face. "I have to deal with this." "I know. Come with me." Imani blinked. "To a board meeting?" "To all of it. The meeting. The press conference. Everything." His gaze was steady and certain. "I want them to see exactly who you are. The woman who saved my life. The woman I'm building a future with. No hiding. No shadows." Fear spiked through her chest, but so did something stronger. Pride. Determination. The absolute certainty that she was done making herself small to fit other people's expectations. "Okay," Imani said. "Let's do this." Alexander's smile was brilliant and fierce. He kissed her once, hard and fast, then grabbed his suit jacket. "Fair warning," he said while buttoning his shirt. "They're going to ask invasive questions. Make assumptions. Try to diminish what we have." "And what are you going to tell them?" "The truth." Alexander straightened his tie and looked at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. That you're the best decision I ever made. 2 hours later, Imani stood beside Alexander in a boardroom full of powerful men and women who looked at her like she was an interesting problem to solve. Their stares ranged from curious to hostile to calculating. Alexander didn't give them time to form opinions. "Before we discuss the restructuring," he said, his voice cutting through the murmurs, "I want to introduce Imani Cole. She's the reason I'm standing here today. She's also the woman I'm going to marry." The room erupted. Imani's head spun. Marriage. He had just announced their engagement to his entire board without asking her first. She should have been furious. Instead, she felt laughter bubbling up in her chest because of course Alexander Vaughn would propose by making a unilateral declaration in a boardroom. He glanced at her with the barest hint of apology in his eyes, and she shook her head with exasperated affection. "You're impossible," she mouthed. "You love me," he mouthed back. She did. God help her, she absolutely did. The board meeting was chaos. Questions flew from all directions. Several members objected to Alexander's personal announcement during professional business. One older man made a comment about inappropriate relationships that made Alexander's expression go dangerously cold. "Imani saved my life when your hand-picked medical staff nearly killed me through incompetence or bribery," Alexander said quietly. "She has more integrity and skill than half this room combined. Anyone who has a problem with her presence can submit their resignation effective immediately." The room went silent. No one resigned. The press conference afterward was worse. Reporters shouted questions about Imani's background, her qualifications, whether she was a gold digger. Cameras flashed like lightning. The noise was overwhelming. Alexander fielded every invasive question with cold precision. Yes, they were together. No, it wasn't a publicity stunt. Yes, he intended to marry her. No, her background was none of their business. Then one reporter asked the question that made everything stop. "Mr. Vaughn, some are saying you're only with Nurse Cole out of gratitude for saving your life. How do you respond to accusations that this relationship is based on obligation rather than genuine feeling?" Alexander's hand found Imani's. He looked at her instead of the cameras when he answered. 3 weeks ago I was bleeding out in a hospital room surrounded by people who were either trying to kill me or too scared to save me. Imani walked through that door and chose to fight for my life when she had every reason to walk away. She didn't do it for money or recognition or access to my world. She did it because saving lives is who she is." His voice softened. "Falling in love with her was the easiest decision I ever made. Keeping her is the only thing that matters now." The cameras went crazy. Questions exploded from every direction. But Alexander just pulled Imani closer and led her off the stage. They made it to the car before Imani's composure shattered. She pressed her hands to her face and tried to control the emotions threatening to overwhelm her. "That was insane," she said. "I know. I'm sorry. You told them we're getting married." "I did." Alexander caught her hands and pulled them away from her face. "I should have asked you first. But I meant every word. I want to marry you, Imani. I want to build a life with you. I want to wake up every morning knowing you're mine and I'm yours." Tears streamed down her face. "You're supposed to ask, not announce." "You're right." Alexander dropped to one knee right there in the back of the car. "Imani Cole, will you marry me?" She laughed through her tears. "This is the worst proposal ever." "Is that a no?" "It's a yes, you impossible man." She pulled him up and kissed him hard. "It's always been yes." Alexander's arms came around her and suddenly everything else fell away. The chaos outside the car. The reporters still shouting questions. The uncertain future waiting for them. None of it mattered as much as this moment. "I love you," Alexander said against her lips. "I love you too." Imani pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. "But we're doing the actual proposal again. Properly. With a ring and romance and you on one knee somewhere that isn't the back seat of an SUV." His laugh was warm and genuine. "Deal." They drove back to the penthouse wrapped around each other, planning a future that looked nothing like what either of them had imagined 3 weeks ago. Imani Cole had walked into Aurelius' private medical center expecting to repay a debt and disappear back into the shadows. Instead she had found a man who saw her completely. Who valued her not despite her past but because of it. Who would burn down his entire empire before letting anything hurt her. And Alexander Vaughn had survived an assassination attempt only to discover that the woman who saved his life was also the woman who would save him from the loneliness he had worn like armor. They were messy and complicated and absolutely worth fighting for. Just like he promised. 6 months later, Imani stood in front of 500 people at a charity gala and introduced the new trauma center that bore her name. Alexander stood beside her, his hand resting possessively on her lower back, his pride evident in every line of his body. The Imani Cole Center for Emergency Medicine would serve underserved communities and train nurses from diverse backgrounds. It would be everything she wished had existed when she was starting out. And it existed because Alexander had listened when she talked about her dreams. After the speeches and the applause died down, Alexander pulled her onto the dance floor. They swayed together while photographers captured the moment and gossip columnists whispered about the billionaire and his nurse-turned-fiancé-turned-partner in every sense of the word. "Happy?" Alexander asked against her ear. Imani looked up at him and felt her heart overflow. "Completely." "Good." He spun her gently. "Because I plan on keeping you this happy for the rest of our lives." "That's a long time." "Not long enough." His kiss was soft and sure. "Not nearly long enough." Imani kissed him back and felt the last of her fears dissolve. She had spent years believing she had to stay invisible to stay safe. Years thinking women like her didn't get fairy tale endings. She had been wrong. Because fairy tales weren't about perfection. They were about finding someone who saw you completely and chose you anyway. Someone who would fight beside you and protect you and love you through the chaos. Someone exactly like Alexander Vaughn. The music swelled. The light sparkled. And Imani Cole danced with her future husband while the world watched and wondered how a quiet night shift nurse had captured the heart of one of the most powerful men alive. The answer was simple. She saved his life. And he saved hers right back. Sometimes the most powerful love stories start with a single moment of courage. Thank you for watching Imani and Alexander's journey. If you loved their story, hit that like button and subscribe for more billionaire romance that will make your heart race. Drop a comment telling us your favorite moment. See you in the next story.